have to end the conflict in Syria. We have to reestablish peace and security in the country. The conflict in Syria is an open sore in international relations. The numbers are appalling. After 5 years of conflict, more than 250,000 people have been killed, more than 4.8 million people have been displaced, and more than 13.5 million depend on humanitarian aid. Germany, therefore, supports the efforts by the Special Representative of the Secretary General, Staffan de Mistura, to find a political solution. There simply is no alternative to a political solution. At some point, parties to the conflict will have to sit down around the table and agree on the future for their country. The only open question now is how many more people will die before this happens. Secondly, we have to do everything we can to assist refugees in neighboring countries around Syria. Everybody who has to do with refugees knows people who have fled their homes do not want to leave the region. They want to stay close to their homes if they only could. If they find their way to Europe, it's only out of desperation. So the third element I would like to add is we have to offer legal pathways for refugees who are eligible for asylum status to enter EU member states legally and in a safe way. And this includes the goal of resettling up to 160,000 refugees among members of the EU. At the same time, we need to stop irregular migration by returning refugees to Turkey by assuring that each claim is assessed on a case-by-case basis in line with EU and international law requirements and the principle of non-refoulement. And finally, we need to disrupt illegal and dangerous trafficking networks. And this is why Germany is contributing to a NATO mission in order to support the gathering of intelligence on trafficking activities. And it goes without saying all these measures need to be pursued simultaneously. Ladies and gentlemen, humanitarian efforts undoubtedly require enormous financial resources, solidarity, and commitment. Given the severity of the challenge, we cannot accept that UN aid agencies are completely underfunded. The London conference earlier this year was a crucial step ahead. Commitment of more than $11 billion in the next 5 years will enable partner to plan ahead. And we think that Germany is doing its fair share in this respect. We have provided more than 1.3 billion euros to alleviate the crisis in Syria since 2012, roughly 650 million euros to spend on humanitarian assistance. The London conference, which Germany co-hosted together with the UK, Norway, and Kuwait, Chancellor Merkel pledged a total of 2.3 billion euros to support Syria and the region until 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, most efforts I've just mentioned are directed towards managing the influx of refugees or improving the situation in host communities in the region. But what about those who are eligible for asylum status in the EU and who are likely to stay for a longer period as long as the situation in Syria will not improve? What about those who hold an academic degree or were in the process of obtaining one when the conflict broke out? In London, participants of the conference agreed that there should be no lost generation of children. I would like to add, neither should there be a lost generation of scholars, researchers, and college graduates from Syria. On a more personal note, let me add, I was a student in Syria in 1988. And I benefited in a way from the exchange in the other direction. I met an enormous number of great academics, scholars, and students who were working mostly under very difficult circumstances, doing a great job in their country. So Syria is a country was a country with a great middle class, with an academic tradition, with well-educated people. So there's something we need to do about this, and we need to offer them opportunities and a perspective for their future. Everybody agrees integration is of the essence in this respect, but how can we ever succeed in integrating the majority of asylum seekers if we cannot manage to provide the best and brightest amongst them with a perspective to become respected members of our communities? How can conflict-ridden countries be rebuilt without well-educated nationals returning home? If we fail to integrate the young and educated, we will face an even bigger challenge trying to integrate the less fortunate ones. College graduates and scholars can lead the way to integration and eventually also to rebuilding Syria. The German Foreign Office is currently funding several multi-annual programs to grant access to higher education to Syrian refugees in Germany, as well as in the region. Let me point out just 3 prominent examples. First, the Leadership for Syria program, which is providing 125 scholarships to Syrian refugees. The Foreign Office is funding this initiative with 9 million euros until 2019. More than 60 German universities are involved. Second, the DAFI program, which is funded with 3.4 million euros annually by the German government. DAFI supports refugees to pursue their studies at institutions of higher education in their respective region. The number of Syrian refugees benefiting from DAFI was increased to over 330 in 2015, and special funding will create 1,000 additional scholarships for Syrian refugees in Turkey this year. And third, the Philipp Schwarz initiative, which has been initiated by the German Foreign Office and the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, and is funded with up to 6.6 million euros. For 2016-17, a total of 44 scholarships will be provided to German institutions of higher education to enable them to host foreign researchers from conflict regions. As you can see, the German Foreign Office is taking the task of preventing a lost generation of scholars, academics, and students very seriously, and is committed to contribute significant financial resources to this end. I thank you very much for your attention, and I wish us all a fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Heiko, for these introductory remarks. I will now introduce our most distinguished panel to you, although for time reasons I will do this rather briefly, and you will find all the speakers' bios in the briefing that we put on all of your chairs, so you can read everything about them. It is no surprise that all of our panelists have in some way or other been involved in the North African Arabic region. Mrs. Karen Koning AbuZayd and Miss Christine Matthews have both lived and served in the region in various roles. Ms. AbuZayd, a scholar of Islamic Studies, is the special advisor of the Secretary General on the summit of addressing large movements of refugees and migrants, which will take place in September just on the other side of the street at the General Assembly. Ms. Matthews also deals with refugees and the challenges they encounter every day in her role as Deputy Director of the UNHCR here in New York, and she has lived in Iraq before. Ambassador Geiro Pedersen of Norway and Ambassador Alvaro Mendonca of Portugal are representing 2 countries which have taken up driving roles in the European approach to deal with the current refugee crisis. And they will surely be elaborating on this in a few moments. Ambassador Pedersen himself has served for Norway in Lebanon and Palestine, so he has also gained some first-hand experience in countries where refugees are a part of everyday life. Ambassador Mendonca has already served for his country in multilateral institutions, both in Brussels and Geneva, where these topics have surely also been high on the agenda. Dr. Dorothea Rulmand and Allan Goodman are representing 2 of the largest organizations in the field of international education, exchange and development training. Dr. Rulmand is Secretary General of DAAD and my boss. Under her leadership, the DAAD developed several programs for scholars and researchers who had to flee their countries. Some of them have already been mentioned by Heiko, culminating in a major grant from the German Ministry for Education and Research at the end of 2015, and I'm sure Dorothea will inform us about this in her presentation. President Goodman of the Institute of International Education has for many years been a champion for all grade programs administered by the IIE that are crucial in providing support for students and scholars facing emergencies all around the world, among them the very renowned Scholars Rescue Fund. We also invited a testimonial, Sana Mustafa, with whom I will change places after the presentations, to join our panel here today, because she is actually one of the people whom we are talking about today. Sana was forced to flee her home country, Syria, because of her political activism. With the help of IIE, she restarted her life and her academic career in the US, but she hasn't stopped speaking out for other refugees. Before Mrs. AbuZayd will make the start with the first presentation of this morning, I would like to state that we have agreed on how to orchestrate this discussion because we want to engage in a discussion with you later on. So each speaker will have about 5 minutes for an initial statement, and I'm going to be very strict in waving this wonderful little green card. Once 4 minutes are over, so you know you have 1 minute to wrap up. And then, as I said, we hope to have many questions of you in the formal Q&A and later over a coffee if you still have time, and some cookies and croissants. So, yeah, something to look forward to. But now we look forward to the first presentation, and maybe you take the mic, you just have to turn it on.
Thank you very much, and I wish to thank the German Mission and the German Academic Exchange Service for convening this discussion on refugees in higher education, as we are eager to build partnerships with higher education institutions in preparation for the General Assembly Summit on 19 September. The summit will be a unique opportunity for world leaders to commit to a concerted approach to addressing large movements of refugees and migrants. Currently, with the support of several other UN entities and based on the inputs from more than 80 member states, including the valuable inputs of Germany, we are preparing the Secretary General's report that will provide a basis for discussion at the summit. Today, I'd like to share with you some preliminary thoughts about what we hope to achieve in September and encourage our exchanging ideas about the potential contribution of higher education. Over the past several years, we've witnessed large movements of refugees, and our response has fallen short of human rights standards and been deficient in international cooperation. The result has been suffering, even perishing of those in transit, an unequal sharing of responsibility, and a disproportionate strain on a limited number of states and host communities. Also evident is a rise in discrimination, exclusion, and xenophobia, plus new tensions arising within and among states. These shortcomings have had a particularly serious impact on education at all levels, including higher education. If we focus for a moment on Syria, excuse me, Chris, thank you for some of your information, more than 20% of Syrians were in higher education before the conflict began in 2011. Now, under 2% of the Syrians are enrolled in higher education. The situation is even worse for the refugees fleeing other crises. UNHCR reports that fewer than 1% of refugees globally have access to higher education. At the summit in September, we have an opportunity, some say a once-in-a-lifetime or once-in-a-generation chance, to decide to manage refugee movements better. A consensus is emerging about how to go about this, how to devise and implement a comprehensive approach to assisting and protecting large movements of refugees. At the same time, we must do more to protect the safety, rights, and dignity of people once they're on the move. The 1951 Refugee Convention recognizes that a movement of refugees may place an undue burden on a hosting state, and that the international community should cooperate to alleviate that burden. However, the current system does not deliver the required amount of protection and assistance at an early enough stage and with sufficient predictability. Furthermore, it does not provide adequate solutions to refugees and host communities in terms of development or resettlement. For this reason, we're proposing a new approach to sharing responsibility for refugees. We will recommend a larger number of states to support the refugee hosting states at an early stage of displacement and in a more predictable manner. States, civil society, private sector, and the UN will all work together to play a role in assisting refugees and their hosts. Since displacement may be long-term, particularly in less well-off states, we must engage development actors at the beginning of a crisis and work with them to mitigate the impact experienced by host communities. I'd like now to reflect with you about the potential role of higher education in contributing to the goals of the summit. Higher education can be a pathway for admission. In some countries, national and private universities could work together to offer scholarships, along with student visas and other assistance to refugee students. Higher education helps refugees find solutions. Whether a refugee returns home or integrates in a new society, a refugee with an education and skills can find meaningful work and make a contribution to the host country. In Geneva last week for the conference on legal pathways for admission of Syrian refugees, I heard Hamid Ulukaya, the founder of Chobani Yogurt, speak about one of his refugee employees who told him, "The day I started working, I was no longer a refugee." His advice, obviously, was to offer refugees the chance to work to be able to support themselves and become productive, independent members of society. Higher education of refugees can also be an advantage, a gift to all of us. Our own students will benefit from acquiring greater and more meaningful knowledge of the rest of the world and be better prepared for living in diverse societies, an enrichment that should be welcomed by all. Given the German government's long-term support for refugees in higher education, I believe it's very appropriate that we conduct this discussion under your auspices. I look forward to the insights that today's program will provide, and I thank you again for inviting me to be part of the discussion.
Thank you very much. Chris, we have already heard some data about the UNHCR, but I think you also have some expectations for the summit, so maybe you would like to share this with us.
Let me begin by expressing UNHCR's profound gratitude to the German mission and the German Academic Exchange Service for facilitating this event. I would also like to thank Germany for its unwavering support for UNHCR. Let me begin again. Is this better? Let me begin by expressing UNHCR's profound gratitude to the German mission and the German Academic Exchange Service for facilitating this timely event. I would also like to thank Germany for its unwavering support to UNHCR refugee operations through generous financial contributions and particularly its remarkable support for refugee education. The German government has to date contributed over $80 million to the Albert Einstein German Academic Refugee Initiative, otherwise known as DAAD. This unique program, administered by UNHCR, provides academic scholarships to refugees and serves as a foundation for their professional development. Since its inception in 1992, the DAAD program has enabled over 2,240 refugee students annually to study at universities and colleges in 40 countries of asylum. The significance of supporting higher education as key to solutions for refugees cannot be overemphasized. Higher education has proven to play an important role in reducing economic vulnerability, promoting social cohesion and stability, supporting economic growth and gender equality, and contributing to protection and solutions for young refugees and their communities. Educated refugees become agents of positive social transformation through shaping perceptions about refugees in their communities or promoting protection through raising awareness on issues such as the prevention of early marriage or reduction of child labor. The high number of successfully employed graduates of the DAAD program are vivid examples of self-reliance, independence within refugee communities, and their contributions that refugees can make to society if given the opportunity to do so. I'd like just to mention one example. Thomas Gobaki Jr., the Deputy Minister of Agriculture in Liberia, was a DAAD graduate student in Ghana. Returning to become Deputy Minister in his country, he mobilized youth in road rehabilitation as part of a prevention measure during the 2014 Ebola crisis. With the number of refugees increasing worldwide, this example serves to underline the importance of expanding education opportunities as part of the solution for refugees. In the past 3.5 years, the global refugee population has grown by 45% to over 20 million. With children making up over half of the world's refugee population, loss of education has a devastating impact on children and the future of their communities. Over 1/3 of the world's out-of-school primary-aged population live in conflict-affected states. And children affected by conflict are likely to be internally displaced or become refugees, more often than not disrupting their education. For older students, the prospect to continue education during displacement are few. The UNESCO Institute of Statistics indicates that 32% of university-aged young people globally attend tertiary education. But as Karen mentioned, only 1% of all refugees have access to higher education. Despite these stark realities, there is room for optimism stemming from innovative partnerships and institutions such as DAAD and other similar institutions. UNHCR is working with partners to support connected learning programs to expand to a larger number of refugee students in pursuit of higher education. Connected learning helps mitigate some of the obstacles refugees face when seeking to access tertiary education, including a lack of resources, lack of opportunity, geographic isolation, and restricted mobility. UNHCR connected partners includes the Jesuit Common Higher Education at the Margins, Borderless Higher Education for Refugees, and the Geneva University In-Zone program. Through these additional programs, 1,450 students had access to higher education in 2015. I would also like to mention that an additional 500 academic scholarships were pledged at the recent meeting in Geneva on the 30th of March, looking at alternative pathways. Let me conclude by stating that UNHCR recognizes the need to ensure an education for children in crisis settings has never been more urgent, including higher education of young people. These are often the most marginalized and hardest to reach groups. I trust that the participants of this event will help to find new and creative approaches to meet the educational needs of children and young people. Thank you.
Ambassador Pedersen. So the numbers are striking, and we are now very eager to hear what Norway's rationale behind its commitment is concerning the refugees and the topic of education. So Ambassador Pedersen, would you give us your...
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? No?
Yes.
Although it's on, so perhaps that helps. Not bad. Technology is a good thing. Listen, the reason why we, of course, give priority to education is, for us at least, self-evident. Without education, there is no chance that we will be able to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. You know, if children cannot attend school, if girls cannot attend school, and in particular girls, we know that they will marry earlier, they will get children earlier, and this will hamper the possibilities for development. So for us, education, and in particular girls' education, has been a priority. But when you look deeper into this, you also immediately understand that if you don't address the issues related to emergencies and protracted crisis, then there is no chance that you can succeed. Only in 2015, 80 million children were affected by crisis, and this disrupted their education. So it's obvious that this is a major disaster for all of us. And in particular, if we, during the next 15 years, are to implement, as I said, the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, the key issue here is no one should be left behind. So this is absolutely necessary to go in this. So what we have been doing is that we have been funding a lot of activities when it comes to education. We are one of the key donors to UNICEF and all the work that they're doing on education. And then, of course, at the London conference on the Syrian humanitarian crisis, we pledged more than $1 billion for the next 4 years. So we are obviously per capita the highest contributor. But this, of course, doesn't change anything. We know that if we are to solve these issues, we have to work together. That's why it's so brilliant to learn about what you're doing in Germany on this. I think when it comes to higher education, you are an example that the others should be looking to. I think we need to look, Syria has been mentioned, and we will hear from Syria later on. My daughter, one of my daughters, studied in Syria in 2010, 2011. In 2011, when she left Aleppo, there were 350,000 undergraduates in Syria. An amazing number. And it was going to increase the number. And we know that the foundation for that was basically funded by the Syrian regime. And that is the case everywhere. We know it needs to be funded by the local governments. Development assistance provide approximately 1% of education. 99% is funded by local governments. So when Syria has then gone from being a middle-income country to, economically speaking, becoming an LDC, we are in a crisis also for the future. So this is something we need to look on, and we need to already today to start planning. How are we going to rebuild the Syrian institutions and get the Syrian academics and the students back again to Syria? And then, of course, a major issue is the situation in the host countries. Lebanon, Jordan, and Turkey. And we have been working together with other like-minded. We've been working with the World Bank to make sure that their programs, usually, neither Lebanon, Turkey, or Jordan would be fit for receiving support from the World Bank. And we immediately started arguing that this has to change. And this is now changing. Of course, there are also nervousness in the host countries. The same debate that we're having in Europe as to sort of, what does this mean? What will be the demographic impact on these countries? Is this an invitation? I see you, I see you. It's good it's not a red card at least. So, what do we need to do? We need to make sure that it is understood in the host countries that they are part of a burden sharing. And they are not the only one that we contribute. We in Europe, in the United States and elsewhere will also participate in this burden sharing. We have a lot of initiatives domestically for how to integrate people coming that have to leave their higher education, different cooperations between different universities and the authorities. But I'm afraid I have no time to go through all these excellent initiatives. But what will be interesting to hear from you, from the audience and the others, are sort of what kind of initiatives could bring more refugees to continue their higher education and things that we're not doing today. So please challenge us so we can bring it back to other capitals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Pedersen. So now to Portugal. 1 billion, that's a lot of money. I don't know, honestly, I have to say that I don't know how much money or programs Portugal has already started with the refugee crisis, but I'm sure that you will elaborate on this, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to be here today and join this distinguished panel, and I'm profoundly thankful to Germany for the invitation. More important than to answer concretely on the figures, I think important is to underline the reason for it and the reason for us to get involved in this and why we really think that's important. And let me start by saying that we are pretty well aware that on our own we will not be relevant alone. Our role, the importance of our role may be to really to bring some dynamism on this matter, to draw people's attention for the importance of higher education, also by the example, by showing what we are doing at our dimension and how this may be replicated in a larger dimension. But starting with the reason for us to get involved in this whole matter is that we are deeply committed to the protection and promotion of all human rights, but very especially to the promotion of the economic, social and cultural rights. Some other countries devote themselves to more political or civil rights. Portugal has a long tradition of devotion to these economic, social and cultural rights. And we give utmost importance to the right to education. And because we believe that education is a powerful drive for change, without education cannot be progress. Our own sense of humanity is harmed without education. And if you look at situations of crisis, both natural disasters and man-made disasters, far too many young people and students pay immediately the price. The right to education is one of the first rights to be violated in those circumstances. It is a fact, fortunately, that over the past decade or so, many progress has been made, giving more attention to primary education. Good progress was made during the last decade or so, thanks to a large extent to the MDG's agenda also to the Education for All movement, just to name a few. So there has been some progress on that. Yet, low levels of humanitarian aid are directed to education in emergencies, leaving millions of students out of school. And there is more than that. It has already been said that if you look at the age bracket of the 18 to 25, only 1% is of this target age is going to universities during emergencies. It's 1%. Basically, we can say that none is going to the universities, to put it bluntly. We think there are 2 points that are worth underlining when we look at emergencies and what we can do concerning education in emergencies. First is that education should be granted from day one. When we plan in emergencies, we have to introduce education from day one. And second point is that we must always see education as interlinked continuum. No primary and secondary education can exist and be sustainable without higher education. We need to look at education as a series of connected phases, where higher education remains a great motivation also for kids to go to school and complete their studies at primary and secondary levels. Seen by so many as the only route out of poverty and conflict, higher education also brings hope for a better future. And this kind of education helps mitigate the psychological impact of conflict and to prevent the risk of young people being marginalized. Let me add, before you interrupt me, that if crisis time is not used to train the next generation and trigger change, then recovery, transition, and reconstruction will become more uncertain and fragile. No sustainable and peaceful future will be possible if we don't introduce this notion of education as a continuum. So, therefore, we really think that higher education in situations of crisis cannot be neglected any longer. And just let me add, if you give me 1 more minute, that we are very strongly committed to support a paradigm shift in promoting higher education in situations of emergency. The new 2030 agenda, as well as the upcoming World Humanitarian Summit and later high-level meeting on the large movement of refugees and migrants, offer unique opportunities to address the access of refugees to higher education and to take collective action to promote change and deliver more. If there will be questions, I will develop a little bit what we are doing in Portugal, but I think that it's very important that we retain this notion that we cannot miss the opportunities we have now in May and then in September. This is crucial, and crucial to have this notion of higher education inserted in the continuum of education accepted by all in September here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mendonca and Mora. You have decided that Allan is going to start us off. That's fine. We have heard so much about Germany, so we can take a little break from Germany right now and focus on our host country, actually, on the IIE and the United States, especially as the IIE has been, as I already said, not only in the person of Allan, but as an organization, long been a champion for programs that are helping refugees all over the world. So Allan, maybe you would like to get us into more details. We have set the scene with these 4 marvelous speakers, but I think now it's the time for the detailed programs that we will hear about from you and then from DAAD.
I will partially disappoint you because I want to begin by thanking Germany. It is real easy to build walls and fences and to turn a cold heart to the plight of refugees, especially when they come by the tens and hundreds of thousands, and your country has not done that, so it's an example to us all. Thank you. I want to thank the ambassador for giving my speech. You covered in 5 minutes almost everything that I think sets the stage, but I was particularly struck when you mentioned the Philip Schwartz initiative. We have in the audience Henry Jarecki, who is the chairman emeritus of the Scholar Rescue Fund, and in 2 weeks' time he will be in Berlin to describe the historic relationship between the Institute and Philip Schwartz when German professors were given safe haven in Turkey. At the same time that Carl Friedrich was helping to found what became the DAAD, it turns out our assistant director was sharing details with Philip Schwartz on what is the practical necessity, what are the practical things you have to do to move academics and protect them from one country to another. And that's really I want to focus on. The rescue business, whether it's students or scholars, is very practical. And we're still learning the lessons. I think between Easter and Passover this year, we will learn a lot about what's not working in the EU agreement. But we also know quite a few things that are working, and that's what we're going to focus on. So maybe just 5 practical things. The first is that, as you will hear from Sana in a few minutes, Syrians make very good students. And our experience in America with the 791 Syrians that are currently here is they really take advantage of the educational opportunities from the classroom to social service to co-curricular activities. And we've learned in the past year a lot about how best to integrate new Syrian students into the classroom, into the university experience, and they're ready to go. So next month we'll publish a book based on that experience, describing how campuses in different stages of accepting students have what they've learned, what is best practice, how they've reconstructed credentials, how they dealt with all of the practical things, including divided families. One sibling is here, another sibling is in Germany, another in Turkey, and how can universities actually be the bridge between all of that. Secondly, we hope in the next month to announce the construction of a virtual global platform to match all the opportunities you've heard of here on this stage, and many more that exist, to match the Syrian and other refugee students with the opportunities that exist. Because now everybody hears about a few. Maybe they try one, it doesn't work, and they're not aware of the 5 or 6 other things that might happen. So we need both a global comprehensive platform and a virtual matching service so that as refugee students reach us, we can say, well, this may not work for you, but I know 3 others, and here's how you apply, and here's what you do. And we have so many Americans, especially, who want to volunteer to work on this, because this is a way, we can't take 1 million refugees like Germany has, but it is a way we can help the student refugee population all over the world get connected with the opportunities that exist. A few weeks ago at the United Nations, thirdly, the former president of Portugal, with whom we worked very closely, Jorge Sampaio, said there are 200 university students in the world, and as a gesture of solidarity, it means I have 1 minute. As a gesture of solidarity, every university student should contribute $1 to refugee students. We will announce a platform that will at least bring that alive in America. There are 20 million people in higher education in America. That's a darn good start. Finally, what I think this is teaching us is we need, and Norway is an example here, we need a Nansen office for the 21st century for the higher education emergency. We need to connect people and universities and scholarship opportunities. And it's not something that other organizations except higher ed folks know how to do. And so we will try to bring to life the very thing that your country led the world in resettling refugees and matching them with employment after World War I. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Allan. Before I give the floor to Dorothea to talk about the programs that we are administering, I would like to say, and I know she's going to hate me for this, that she also is a testimonial because she has taken into her family a Syrian refugee who's pursuing her studies to become a doctor. So she also knows what it's like on the other side of the, not only giving the money, but also receiving the scholars. And maybe you can also tell us a little bit about this experience.
Tina, thank you so much, and thank you to all of you to make this meeting possible. Yes, it helps a lot to have a bottom-up approach and bring it together with a top-down as well. I want to give you a bit of an insight what we are actually doing. The idea is an organization. We do have a long-standing cooperation with countries in crisis, as for example Afghanistan, similar to IIE, to Iraq and others. So we already do have quite some experience what is needed. But what happened last year, we were really faced with a new challenge, and in the end, I hope, a new opportunity. As you all know, more than 1 million people came into Germany, mostly from Syria, but from other countries, Iraq, Afghanistan as well. And we calculated that out of this figure might be around 50,000 young people do have the potential to join German universities. To be very frank, the database is still quite poor. It's a very conservative estimation. Others, for example, the institution, the Federal Institute for Migration and Refugees, they estimate 100,000. But only if you think about 50,000, what does it mean? It means 2 additional universities. And as your ambassador already mentioned, this costs quite some money. So we started last summer to develop a concept how we can join these young people to get integrated into our universities. And what I really must say, and I'm very proud of it, what I never would have expected, there was such a huge engagement in Germany by universities, by students, and by the civil society. And I would say without this, it wouldn't have worked. So some universities, they just opened their doors, they offered guest stages for the students. The German students joined with law clinics, medical clinics, tutoring, mentoring for the refugee students. They went to the camps and helped them to prepare. So this was a marvelous start, but what I was very worried about, we needed kind of sustainability. So we developed a concept with 3 different stages actually. What we need at the beginning is a kind of entrance phase. We have to have our universities for the assessing whether the students bring with them the real requirement for studying, aptitude, diagnosis, advising. The second step is what we call preparatory phase. Many of the refugees had to skip universities. You told me from your sister. So they need some prep courses, some subject-related language courses, and intercultural training as well. The third phase is studying phase. Monitoring academic progress, mentoring, might be some additional courses, tutoring. And the last phase we don't care about at the moment is the transition phase into professional life. You mentioned this. If they have to stay on home for a longer period of time, of course, later on they want to work. What are the challenges? There are quite a few, I can tell you. Still, and this is very slow, and I'm sure the ambassador knows about it, many others as well, registration. Young people have to wait to get a certain legal status for asylum because before that they cannot go on study. Language, a very big issue, I will come back to this later. The assessing of the potential, I already mentioned, study places, this is quite an issue as well, and the channeling into the higher education system. After establishing this structure, we approached the German Parliament, and I'm most happy that some of our MPs are here today, and different ministries. And the Ministry of Education and Research decided very fast to offer 100 million for the next 4 years to make this integration possible. That might not be sufficient in the end, but for the start it was really great. Very unbureaucratic, very fast, and similar, I will come back to the Foreign Office for opportunities in the region. What did we do? We introduced some new programs. For assessing, we made use of programs we are already running, everything free of charge. We established a new program called INTEGRA, which funds the participation of refugees in subject-related and language-based preparatory courses. at our universities and a big program called Welcome, students helping refugees, joining the foreign students at the respective institutes. Other initiatives, information, extremely important. We built up a platform for the refugees in the different languages, but as well there was lots of information needed for the German universities. So we offered many courses on intercultural skills, on legal issues, on traumata, and many things else. But this is just one side. What some of you already mentioned, it's at least as important to support structures in the region. So we offer many different scholarship schemes in the neighboring countries, from Turkey, Lebanon, Egypt, Jordan actually, and there were many funds available. You already mentioned, Ambassador, from the Foreign Office, supporting German projects, for example, in the region, to have a huge intake of refugees. You mentioned Dafi and others. Now I'm asked to come to the end, and I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dorothea. I'm stopping you because we want to hear from Sana, our testimonial, and then we of course want to engage with you in the discussion, and so I'm going to swap seats, or I will be standing there as the mistress of ceremony. And so we have been talking about measures, setting the scene, the necessity of having one stream from the very beginning, as the ambassador said, to the end of higher education, and then also into coming into the workforce. And now we will hear Sana, and I'm also going to wait. I know your story is long, but so let us hear about your way to New York.
First, I'd like to thank the German mission, DAAD, the exchange program, German exchange program, and last but not least, IIE, for having me here. And I truly mean IIE, because without them, I would have not made it here. You're seeing me now after 3 years of fleeing Syria. So I'm quite in a very good position comparing to the first year and a half. And this goes back to IIE actually. I fled Syria almost 3 years ago in June 2013, and due to my dad's detention, he got detained by Assad regime. I could not go back home, and I came to the US, and I had to stay here and survive basically. I spent the first year and a half just surviving. My only worry was I just wanted food and shelter. That's all I wanted for the first year and a half, and I get my legal papers done. So, I mean, all of you can imagine now there are many stories out there, and those who are living in Germany, and those who engage with the refugees. The first year could be really, really tough, and this was the case for me, and I think for all other refugees. Until after, I'm not gonna go into details about the first year and a half, but after spending a year and a half surviving, I was asking myself, what's next? I can't stay like this. What's my next step? And the answer came from IIE at that time. When I come across one of their matching services for Syrian students to the US colleges in the United States. And I just contacted IIE, and I was, I'm here, and I really would love to continue my education, and as I did 4 full years in Syria. And IIE was very, very responsive immediately. And they did not even stop by matching me with a school in the US, but also they provided me with scholarship to do my English courses, to get my TOEFL test and other English preparation courses. And I think this is a very important step, because many of us don't have, even when we get the scholarship, we don't have the English skills to have like TOEFL and IELTS. And even to get these tests done, it's expensive. So being offered, this was a huge help. And this is when, after a year and a half of surviving, my life changed and I started thriving. And I think this is why I'm here right now. After a year and a half of me continuing my education, now I'm doing political science at Bard College, and I'm graduating in December, and I'm working with the UN, and things just have changed dramatically after having the opportunity to continue my education. And this is, I'm quite privileged to be here right now. As you all as you all know, I'm thinking in your minds. And this breaks my heart, seeing my sisters and my friends, my Syrian fellows in Turkey and neighboring countries struggling to continue education. And I have a 16-year-old sister now. She has not gone to school in 3 years, as she fled to Turkey, also due to my dad's detention. And I have another sister who's now 25 years old, just made it to Germany on March 29th. And hopefully she's seeking opportunities to continue her education. But this is only us, you know, even in the same family, we're not all privileged. And I really would love this privilege to pass on to every Syrian, to every refugee. And as you said, I think I stopped surviving when I started education, and then I started thriving. And this goes back to IIE, the US, and actually the people here. I have received so much support, and I can only imagine the support Syrians receive in Germany, because of course you've been so welcoming, you've taken over 1 million by now, and educational opportunities are very huge in Germany. So I'm going to end it here. I'm going to thank you so much for having me here again. And I would suggest you were asking about suggestions, I would say those of us Syrians who got opportunities, make use of us. I'm willing, and I started already mentoring and helping other Syrian students to go through scholarships programs. And I think coming from the same country, speaking the same language and the same culture helps a lot in facilitating this process. So make use of us.
Thank you very much, Sana. Very moving, especially when you talk about your two sisters. So I hope the 25-year-old will soon find somebody like Roland to take her under her wings. So we have indeed some time for Q&A, let's say 15 minutes at least. We have 2 roaming mics, my colleagues have them. If you have a question, please indicate, and please tell us very briefly who you are and whom you want to ask something. So the lady over here.
Hi, my name is Cindy Von Feeney-Hatlas, and I work with one of the UNHCR programs and Jesuit Commons hired at the margins. And I want to echo the voice that I heard from our refugees around the world when they say they stop surviving and start thriving when they get into a higher education program. One of the things that I think we've learned in the past 5 years is that it really is not just enough to enroll students in educational programs. We have to make sure that they have those supporting skills and accompaniment that help them succeed. So when we're thinking about this, I guess the question I would have of our young lady is, how do you think we can help do a better job at that?
Thank you for your question. I think what really helped me in the educational journey in the US was social support, because honestly when we flee Syria it's not over, especially when we have our members still held back by the government, or still living under the bombing and shelling in Syria. So mentally it's very hard actually to process here and continue this road. So what really helped me personally was the love. And I received I still do so much love and support from the community here. And I think this really counts a lot.
Thank you. There was another question over there. Yeah. Okay.
Hello, thank you for arranging this immensely timely and important panel discussion. I'm Brenda Tooley. I'm from Monmouth College in Illinois. We have a fairly large, for us, community of Syrian undergraduate students, 19, and they are amazing young people. Our entire community is better for their presence among us. So they're incredible. But what I want to say is that there are a number of organizations in the United States that it would be helpful to reach out to. And I want to just mention one. I'm a member of the International Association of College Admissions Counselors with a very, very, very active Facebook group. And about 2 weeks ago, someone posted on this Facebook group a question: are there any organizations out there willing to help place Syrian students? And of course, a number of us quickly responded, sending links to IIE and Geiro and other organizations, and I was able to connect Maya Al-Khatib, who's the director of Geiro, with several of the high school counselors in the UWC system, in the United World College of Systems, because they're trying to place students. So this is an incredible opportunity to use an existing network of professionals on both sides of the table, that is, high school counselors and college admissions counselors. It's already happening. It's already happening. And if there would be a way for us to be even more mindful in helping to connect people, a number of us would be willing to do this.
Thank you very much. I think, Allan, maybe would you like to comment, because you're going to have another event pretty soon?
We are really just, I'm so sorry, we are just
You don't have to switch it on it.
We are just at the beginning of understanding how many opportunities there are out there, how many networks that need to get mobilized in America, let alone the world. But because we're at the beginning, there's no reason to stop and no reason to get discouraged. There are lots of resources that can be mobilized, and we're committed to doing that. And God bless Monmouth, they have been just a leader in showing us all how you can take more than one Syrian student at a time and have terrific outcomes.
Lady in front.
Thank you. I have a question for Sana. I should maybe briefly introduce myself. My name is Carola. I'm the interpreter for the German delegation from the subcommittee of our parliament. So I do have a question that takes us away from education a little bit. I was wondering, you said it was, of course, mentally hard for you to come here, and your family is scattered all over the place, and you said you received so much love and attention here. What I was wondering is there some kind of a like post-trauma care facility, or do you have like a psychological support unit, or people, like professionals you can turn to, or because I imagine, I don't want to call it PTSD, but I mean, you lived through a war, and some of the other refugees have too, and I was wondering whether there's some kind of a care unit or facility that you can turn to, because I think that education helps, and education is great, and it helps you thrive. I totally see that, but I'm wondering whether there's some kind of professional medical help you can turn to.
Thank you for your question. It's something for the last 3 years I've been thinking of, and I always say I feel until now I did not have the time or the ability to process and what happened, and I don't know if I will ever have. And like personally, on a personal level, I've been seeking for professional medical help. It's been very challenging finding counsel. We need more than counseling, I think, like therapy for refugee. I mean, at my school, they provided me with counselor, and that was helpful for a little bit, but it's, I think it's something more than counseling. And I think this is something maybe when someone gets scholarship or starts enrolling in a school, maybe it's something also we can work on trying to match them with, finding them mental support.
Thank you for the question. We have another one. Yep.
Hi, this is just for, I guess anyone can answer. My name is Jenny Obamu. I'm with International Education News. I wanted to ask, the ambassador from Portugal, you mentioned about education emergencies and kind of being ready for this. We're always a bit reactionary to things. I'm just wondering, is there a way to kind of start to sustain funding even after these situations happen for future to be kind of more ready? Are there any ideas that people have put in place to be prepared before these situations happen?
Well, that's the whole purpose of it. Exactly to be ready to respond in case of emergencies. Let me just tell you how we have organized ourselves in Portugal. Basically, we have the official services that have to proceed with the papers to see the refugees and to accept them and so on. So we have this official structure, so to say, that belongs to the state. But then we have created a civil society platform to receive the refugees. And a lot of organizations belong to this civil society platform. Then the institutions of the state, as soon as they proceed with the acceptance of the refugees, immediately contact this platform. And they themselves direct the refugees to the organization A, B, and C of the civil society. One of them is this global platform for the Syrian students, so that anyone with the qualifications to join the university is immediately directed to this organization, which is a civil society organization that contacts the universities. The point is, the resources are there. The universities are there. And we did manage to convince the universities to open up some places for the students. But our point is that if you take it globally, if you take the global number of universities, namely here in the United States, you don't have really to build a completely new structure to provide higher education for these people. The structure is in place. As someone has mentioned there before, it's just the question of connecting the persons involved. And really for a large university to provide a few places more for the Syrian students, that's not a major burden, you see. So the structures are there. What we need is to convince ourselves and convince others, I mean member states of the UN, that this has to be a very important point. Without this, we will not have a sustainable situation. That's the first point, and that's why I attach a lot of importance to the report we will get. Without a specific mention in this report, it will be very difficult to mobilize all the member states and by them and through them their own universities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I would like to take 2 more questions and then give our panelists a chance for a closing statement. So we have Katrin, and then somebody over there.
Hello, my name is Katrine Kempeners. I work here in New York for DAAD. I have a question for Mr. Goodman. You mentioned earlier that as a matter of fact that the United States could not take in as many refugees as Germany, for example. And of course we all have some idea of why that may be the case, but I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit on that, especially from your perspective. And because quite frankly, in terms of GDP and wealth, and the US is a very developed country, right up there with Germany. So it would be very interesting to hear your perspective on why the United States cannot take in as many refugees.
Alas, it's geography. The flood of refugees came from Syria to Turkey to Greece and found their way to open hearts in Germany. The Atlantic Ocean is a very significant barrier. Our country does have a reputation and a duty to take in refugees. We took in more than 250,000 boat people from Vietnam conflict, which we caused and participated in. But in this case, it really was the geography that placed the burden on Europe. And I think our job now is to help Europe with its burdens and to whether students remain in Germany or come here or go to American schools in Germany, for example. We have to find a whole range of solutions, and it's very much an American problem for which we are very grateful for Germany's response.
Thank you. Last question over there.
Good morning, my name is Angelica Mendes-Launi. Until recently I worked with the Jesuit Refugee Service, and one of its core activities is to provide education. So I'm very grateful for what I've heard this morning in this room. It's been very encouraging. I guess what's been going through my mind also is that 86% of refugees are hosted by developing countries, and many of them are stuck in situations of forced displacement for a very long time. UNHCR says 17 years on average in forced displacement. And so I guess I just want to encourage everyone in this room to think of solutions to bring higher education to the refugees in those situations. Because Sana, you mentioned you're one of the fortunate few who can leave their countries and come to a Western country and benefit of education there, but there's a huge majority stuck in those situations with very few resources, and often after secondary school, that's the end for them. And JRS has always emphasized that investing in education is investing in peace. So I think it's of paramount importance to really think of creative solutions to bring higher ed to people in those situations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have heard about challenges, about legal problems that are very big. The problem starts with people not having any documentation of their education so far. They need to be assessed. We have about the fact that they also have a lot of other chips on their shoulders because they fled from countries where they were threatened by bombs or decapitation or whatever you can imagine horrible can happen to somebody. We have heard about the fact that it has to start immediately, the help has to start immediately once somebody flees his country or her country, and it has to go on until you enter the labor market, which is a very significant point. And we have also heard about the fact that the refugees can also be a very welcome addition to the society that they come to. And if I can speak for my own country, this is certainly one of the reasons why the Germans were so open in receiving people from abroad. So if I can ask you, the wonderful panel, just to give me maybe one sentence. If you look at all these things, if there was the fairy who came and said, what is your one wish right now? And maybe all of you will have different wishes, and combined there will be the perfect set for the fairy. And then we just hope for the summit to answer to all these questions and prayers. Could I ask you, maybe, Karen, would you like to make a start?
Yes, I'll do it quickly so I can say more than one thing. One thing to really ask for is for there to be as many offers of jobs and scholarships for people who are on the move. Very important, and get those out there, those offers out there. Just to say another thing about the trials and the strength of the host communities and how much they need and how well they've done, especially in Jordan and Lebanon and Turkey, in providing education at the lower education opportunities, and we should support them as much as we can. And then, because some of you have mentioned such interesting things that you know about, you're doing, we want to, after our report is out in May, we want to have work on social media, working up to the summit, and have a website, and anything you'd like to put on that website to get the information out, we welcome. So we'll be reaching out to anybody who can reach out to us.
That's a great offer. Thank you very much. Maybe I would like to ask Ambassador Mendonca and Maura, what is your, if you could say one or maybe two wishes or aims?
Well, the one I have already mentioned, I hope someone took note of that. And that's, I really agree, I think that we need to have in this report from the Secretary General a strong reference to this education continuum, including higher education. It's a fundamental starting point. The second one point that I would like to mention is also something I referred to here. The resources are here. The resources are there. What is lacking is the organization, is the linking of the humanitarian, the emergency, with the university. That's what we have to work for. With these 2 points, if we get this starting with the Secretary General really involved in this, we will do our own part in linking the humanitarian emergencies with universities.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Pedersen, I see you nodding, so you seem to agree. Are these your wishes as well?
Absolutely. Even though I'm not a member of the European Union, we agree. This is a good point. Listen, just to follow up on one thing that was mentioned, and that I believe is extremely important, that is that the average time for people being displaced by an emergency is 17 years. This most probably is increasing. We are approaching emergencies as if they are short-term crises. And this is the reason why only 2% of the total global funding for humanitarian support is going to education. The total amount going to humanitarian systems is approximately 22 billion, depending a little bit on how you count it. And so this is, of course, a complete misunderstanding. And this is part of the reason why we are struggling. And linked to this is, of course, that we tend to treat humanitarian crisis and development as two separate things. To move forward, we need to increase the funding for education, and we need to understand that humanitarian and development needs to be linked. And that would be my main wish, and I hope Karen can take care of that. Thank you.
I'm sure she will. Chris, can I ask you, UNHCR, what is your idea of the bullet magic wand?
Well, UNHCR would have many wishes for refugees, but I think with having just finished our meeting on the 30th of March on alternative pathways, our wish would be for greater avenues for refugees to be able to be admitted to countries, and academic scholarships and higher education opportunities is a major element in that.
Thank you. Now I see my boss nodding, so I pass on the baton to her.
Okay. I would like to come back to the beginning. My wish is that this challenge we face at the moment really will be an opportunity in the end, and that we can succeed in this. It could be and it should be opportunity for the refugees, first of all, but for our own society as well. And for this, I think universities, they really play a crucial role. Because, as you mentioned, the structures are there. We have to support them. We need some resources, of course, and hopefully our government will go on to support us in this activity. But on the other hand, people like you, coming from a university, you are a positive multiplier. And you all know the whole process is not undisputed in our societies. So we need positive role models. And they, first of all, can come from universities. And this, we just have to go on.
Thank you. Allan,
I want all the wishes that we've heard.
It's okay.
But I worry a lot about the point Ambassador Pedersen made, and Angelica. We'll get through this emergency somehow, but this is not an emergency. This will preoccupy us for the rest of our lifetimes. That's why we need a Nansen office for the 21st century, for higher education, because it's not just Syria. It's the refugee camps all over the world, in Asia and Africa. And because people are in them so long, it's not just we can fix it this year and next year. We need a global, permanent effort, and that's why we're committing to trying to explore it.
Thank you. I'm sure, Sarah, you have many more wishes than just one, but can you just share the one big wish with us?
The one big wish has nothing to do with education. It's mostly my dad's freedom and peace for Syria, and my wish for the education that just every person in this world, not only Syrians but all refugees, have access to education.
There is nothing more to add. Thank you very much to the wonderful